College dreams shattered, my stepdaughter's cruel scheme exposed on graduation day. The silence was a scream, an unbearable, suffocating absence of the usual vibrant hum of Emily's life. Walking into my daughter's room that fateful morning, I was met not with the energetic flurry of college prep, but with a chilling quiet, a silence born of shattered dreams and broken trust. Curled on her bed, shoulders convulsing with silent sobs, Emily held a letter, a death sentence to the future she'd so meticulously crafted. They rejected me, she choked out, the words laced with utter devastation. Stanford. They said they had to rescind my early acceptance. Academic dishonesty. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Academic dishonesty, Emily. The girl who bled ambition, who lived and breathed for Stanford, the one who'd sacrificed everything to achieve perfection. This had to be a mistake. But as I scanned the brutal, formal language of the letter, a horrifying suspicion began to take root, a suspicion that pointed directly at the heart of our seemingly perfect blended family. Since you accuse my daughter of cheating, here's the evidence you ignored, I said, placing the envelope on the dean's desk. My stepdaughter had ruined my daughter's college dreams with false accusations, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. On graduation day, the truth would finally be revealed. The first thing I noticed when I walked into my daughter Emily's room, what's the silence? No music playing, no typing at her desk, none of the usual sounds of a busy 17-year-old preparing college applications. Just silence. In the side of my daughter curled up on her bed, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Emily, I said softly, my heart dropping. What happened? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, clutching a letter in her trembling hand. They rejected me, she managed between sobs. Stanford said. They said they had to rescind my early acceptance due to academic dish. My blood ran cold. Academic dishonesty. Emily, the girl who had spent the last 4 years maintaining perfect GPA, play while juggling varsity swimming, student government, and countless volunteer hours. That's impossible, I said, sitting on the edge of a bed. There must be some mistake. Emily handed me the letter, her hands shaking. Someone reported that I cheated on my AP chemistry finals. They said they had proof. As I skimmed the formal language of the rejection letter, my mind was already racing. Emily had been dreaming of Stanford since she was 12. Her room was decorated in cardinal red and white, Stanford pennants, hanging on every wall. She had earned this, really earned it. And now someone was trying to take it away from her. Would do this. I wondered aloud. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew. The slight smile I've seen on Grace's face at breakfast this morning suddenly made horrible sense. Grace, my stepdaughter, the girl who had made it her mission to compete with Emily ever since her father. And I'm married 3 years ago. My name is Catherine Mitchell. And at that moment, watching my daughter's dreams crumble because of what I strongly suspected was her stepsister's jealousy, I felt something inside me. Be careful, peace I maintained in our blended family. Play, always trying to keep everyone happy, suddenly seemed less important than just, what's this, Mom? Emily's voice was small, younger somehow. What am I going to do? Stanford was everything. I pulled her clothes, letting her crying in my shoulder. Will my mind, furiously. We're going to fight this, I said firmly. Whatever it takes. What Emily didn't know, what no one in our family really knew, was that before I became Catherine Mitchell, devoted wife and mother, I've been Catherine Reynolds, investigative journalist. I had spent 15 years uncovering truths that people tried to hide, following paper trails. What's in exposing lies? I had stepped away from that life when I married David, choosing instead to focus on our blended family. But those skills, they never really go away. I need you to tell me exactly what, I said, pulling back to look at Emily every detail. Through her tears, Emily explained the accusation, claiming she had cheated on her AP chemistry final last semester in the same class where she had finally pulled ahead of Grace. Apparently someone had provided the school with evidence that Emily had accessed test materials before. But I didn't, she insisted, fresh tears spilling. I studied for weeks. You know I did. I didn't know. I'd watch her spend countless nights at her desk. Chemical equations spread around, like a complicated puzzle. Emily had earned her A+, honestly. The same applause that had pushed your class ranking just above Grace's. Grace got her Stanford rejection last week, Emily said quietly, play realization dawning in her eyes. She was so angry. Don't worry about Grace right now, I said, though internally my suspicions were hardening in assert. Just tell me everything you remember about the test day. Has Emily recounted the details? I made mental notes. The testing room setup, the seating arrangement, the proctor's position, every detail. Could be important. What Grace and know what none of them knew was that she hadn't just messed with my daughter's future. She had awakened something I kept dormant for years. The relentless pursuit of truth that had once been my life's work. I waited until Emily had cried herself to sleep before making my first move. In my home office, I pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in years. The reporter's instincts kicked in as I began mapping out what I knew and what I needed to find out. First step, the evidence itself. What exactly have been provided to the school and, more importantly, how had it been obtained? I opened my laptop and typed out a carefully worded email. Now to Stanford's admissions office, requesting copies of all materials related to the academic edition. Misty claim. Then I sent another to Emily's high school principal, scheduling an urgent meeting. As I heard footsteps in the hallway, Grace's distinctive gait. She paused briefly near my office door, probably wondering why the light was still on at midnight. I kept typing, giving no indication that I had noticed or presence. What are things she had won? What are belief that our perfect plan had worked? Because what Grace didn't understand was that she had just made a crucial mistake. She hurt my daughter, yes, but more than that, she had left a trail. And following trails, that's what I did best. The next morning, one maintained my normal routine. Made breakfast, packed lunches, smiled at David and Grace as they left for their days. But as soon as they were gone, I began my real work. First stop, Emily's high school. Principal Martinez was waiting for me, looking uncomfortable as I took a seat across from his desk. Mrs. Mitchell, he began. I understand you're upset, but the evidence. Show me, I interrupted calmly. Show me exactly what evidence was presented to Stanford. He hesitated, then pulled out a file. Inside were screenshots of what appeared to be text messages between Emily and another student discussing test answers. There were also photographs of what looked like test materials on Emily's desk before the. I studied them carefully, my old training kicking in. These are very convenient, I said finally. Almost too convenient. Tell me, did anyone verify the authenticity of these messages? Check the metadata on the photos. Principal Martinez shifted in his. Give me the serious nature of the accusation. I'll take that as a no. I closed the file. I'd like copies of everything, please. And I'll need the name of the student who provided. I can't reveal that information. I smiled, but there was no warmth. You can and you will. Because if you don't, the next person sitting in this chair will be my lawyer, asking why the school acted on unverified evidence without due process. I walked out with everything I needed, including the confirmation that Grace had been the one to report Emily. Phase 1 complete. Now for the real work to begin. The more I dug into Grace's evidence, the more threads began to unravel. Sitting at my desk late that night, surrounded by printouts and digital forensics reports, I felt a familiar surge of satisfaction. The kind I used to get when a big story was coming together. The text messages Grace had submitted. They were fake. Good fakes, but fake nonetheless. My old contact and digital forensics had confirmed it. The metadata didn't match up, and the timestamps have been manipulated. The photos of test materials on Emily's desk, taken weeks after the actual exam, carefully staged to look incriminating. Grace have been thorough. I gave her that, but she hadn't counted on going up against someone who had spent years exposing frauds. It's far more sophisticated than. In this, my phone boo. Text from David, working late again. Don't wait up. I smiled grimly. My husband had no idea what his daughter had done, or what I was doing to fix it. He saw Grace as his perfect little girl, incapable of such calculated cruelty. Just like you didn't really know about my past life as an investigative journalist. Our marriage had been built on fresh starts by leaving the past behind. But some things couldn't be left behind. Emily appeared in my doorway looking small in her oversized Stanford sweatshirt. What are you doing up so late? I quickly minimized the screens on my laptop. Do some work, honey. How are you holding up? She shrugged, but I could see the pain in her eyes. One submitted applications to other schools, safety schools. She practically whispered the last part like it physically hurt to say. Emily, I said carefully. I need you to trust me. This isn't over. She looked at me skeptically. Stanford already made their decision. Grace won. Did she? I pulled out a folder. Come here. I want to show you something. I laid out the evidence of Grace. I want to show you something. I laid out the evidence of Grace's deception, the forensics report, the timeline inconsistencies, everything I gathered over the past. Emily's eyes wide, and she took it all in. She really did this. Her voice trembled. But why? Why would she go to all this trouble? Because she couldn't beat you fairly, I said simply, and she underestimated who she was dealing with. Emily looked up at me, really looked at me like she was seeing something new. Mom, how did you figure all this out? I took a deep breath. It was time for some truth. Before I married your stepdad, before I became just mom, I was an investigative journalist. I specialized in exposing frauds and cover. I smiled at her shocked, text expression. Let's just say Grace picked the wrong person. Listen to try to deceive. Justin, we heard the front door open. David and Grace returning from their late. Emily quickly helped me gather the papers. Understanding instinctive. Lovely that this needed to stay between us for now. Trust me, I whispered as she headed back to United. And for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of hope in her. The next morning, Grace was her usual sweet self at breakfast. Play the concerned stepsister perfectly. Emily, I heard back from UCLA yesterday. His psychology program is really good too. You know, I watched Emily's hands clenched under the table, but admired her composure. Thanks, Grace. I'll keep that in mind. David beamed. Always looking out for others. Are you? Sweetheart. I took a slow sip of coffee, remembering the latest piece of evidence I had uncovered last night. Grace's secret email account. The one she used to submit the false claims to Stanford. She's been clever, using a VPN to hide your tracks, but not quite clever enough. After they left for school, I made my move. First stop, Stanford's Office of Academic Integrity. I had an appointment with the dean, and this time I was armed with more than just maternal indignation. Dean Harrison was a stern-looking woman with steel gray hair. In charm, she didn't look like someone easily swayed by emote. Perfect, Mrs. Mitch. She began. Well, I understand your distress. I cut her off by placing a thick folder on desk. With respect, Dean Harrison. You don't understand anything yet, but you're about to. For the next hour, I laid out the EV. The forensic analysis proved the text messages were fab. The metadata, showing the photos were taken after the email trail links everything back to Grace's. This, I concluded, is not just about my daughter's college. This is about a deliberate attempt to destroy someone's academic future through fraud. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Dean Harrison was silent for a long moment, reviewing the documents with growing concern. Finally, she looked up at me. This is quite comprehensive, Mrs. Mitchell. May I ask how you obtained all this? Let's just say I have experience in uncovering the... I met her gaze stead. The question is, does Stanford have the integrity to admit they acted on false information? She nodded slowly. We'll need to verify everything independently. Play, of course. What if this all checks out? We may need to reconsider our decision regarding your daughter's admission. As I left her office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulder. Phase 2 is complete, but the hardest part was still to come. Because Grace, she still thought she had no idea that her carefully constructed plan was about to come crashing down around. And I had decided that the revelation would happen in the most public way possible. At her high school graduation, where she was scheduled to give a speech as salutatorian right after Emily would speak. That is, if everything went according to my plan. Graduation day. Play dawned bright and clear. I sat in the school auditorium between David and Grace's mother. Janet put phone in for the occasion. The proud parents watching their children graduate. If they only knew what was coming. Grace was practically glowing in her white graduation robe, chatting with friends near the... Emily sat quietly, the interval Victorian chair, her face composed, put her hands fidgeting with the envelope containing. What neither of them knew was that I had a third envelope. Safely. Can you believe both our girls did so well? Janet whispered too. Grace was so disappointed about Stanford, but she handled. Is it with such? UCLA will be lucky to have her. I smiled politely, thinking about the email I received from Stanford yesterday confirming everything was in. Yes, they both handled everything exactly as expected. The ceremony began with the usual speeches. Is the principal, the school board president in various dig. Finally, it was time for the student speeches. Emily stood first, walking to the podium with quiet. Her voice was clear. When I was little, my mom taught me that truth always finds its way to. Then no matter how deep someone tries to bury, the truth has a way of surfacing. When it matters, my heart swelled with pride. We had worked on this speech together, carefully cracking each word. This year I learned that lesson firsthand. I learned that sometimes people will try to take what's yours, will try to dim your light to make their shine bright. But I also learned that if you stay true to yourself, if you keep working and believing in what's right, justice has a way of. I saw a great shift uncomfortably in her seat. Emily continued, her voice. What's growing stronger? Today, as we prepare to leave these halls and start our new journeys, I want to share something with all of you. Something that proves that truth and justice aren't just words in inspirational quotes, they're real, and they matter. I stood up, drawing confused looks from David and Emily said, my acceptance of Stanford was rescinded because someone provided false evidence claiming I had. Today, I'm honored to announce that not only has that decision been, but Stanford has offered me the full academic scholarship. The auditorium erupted in racist face a gun pale. But wait, Emily held up, there's more to this story. Mom. I walked to the stage, my heels clicking against the wooden floor in the sudden sill. Principal Martinez, who had been briefed about what was coming, nodded slightly. Good morning, I said, taking the podium. My name is Catherine Mitch, and before I was a mother, I was an investigative journalist specializing in exposing. Today, I'm here to share some evidence that recently came. I opened my envelope and began laying out the truth, the fabricated, the stage photos. What's the secret email? With each revelation, Grace sank lower in her. The person who orchestrated this campaign to destroy my daughter's future, I continued, my voice steady, is sitting on this stage right now. The audience cast. David stood up, his face a mask of confusion, in growing horror. Grace, I said, turn in to face my stepdaughter directly. Would you like to explain why you did it? Grace looked wildly around like a cornered. I don't know what you're talking about. You can't prove. Actually, I interrupted. pulling out the final piece of evidence, a printout of emails from her secret account. "I can." And I did. What followed was chaos. Grace burst into tears. David demanded explanation. Janet looks like she might faint. But through it all, Emily stood tall. Finally Vind. Principal Martinez took the microphone, his voice cutting through the, "In light of this evidence, which has been thoroughly verified, the school board has made some adjustments. What's today's proceed? Grace Mitchell, please step down from the. Your diploma will be held pending a review of your academic." As Grace fled the stage, I returned to my seat. David turned to me, his face a mix of anger and betray. "Why do you tell me? Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly, "or would you have defended her, like you always do?" Get no answer for that. The ceremony content, subdued fashion. Emily gave the rest of her speech, speaking about integrity, and second, she was gracious, never mentioning Grace by name again. Afterward, as we stood in the parking lot taking pictures, Stanford's formal reinstatement letter safely tucked in Emily's graduation, David approached me. "I don't know what to say," he began. "I had no idea Grace could do something like." "I know," I said simply. "That's part of the problem." United slowly. "What happens now?" "Now we deal with the con. All of us." I looked at him steadily. "Grace needs help, David. Real help, not excuses or protection." Later that night, as Emily and I sat in our backyard looking at the stars, she asked me the question I've been expecting. "Mom, did you have to do it so publicly? Expose Grace like that?" I thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes, sweetheart, justice needs witnesses. What Grace did wasn't just about hurting you. It was about making everyone believe a lie. The truth needed the same." She nodded, understanding. "Wolf, ever be the same with David?" "No," I said honestly. "But maybe that's not a bad thing. Sometimes relationships need to be rebuilt on truth instead of comfortable." Emily moved into her dorm. Her room was exactly as she dreamed it would be, decorated in cardinal red. Grace, that started therapy, finally confronting the jealousy and insecurity that had driven her action. David and I were in counseling, working to rebuild our marriage on a foundation of. As for me, I discovered that my old investigative skills, they'd just been waiting for the right moment to resurface. I started taking on some freelance work, exposing truths that needed to be told. Sometimes the biggest stories aren't about international conspiracies or corporate. Sometimes they're about the quiet battles fought in suburban homes, where truth and justice matter just as much as they do any. And sometimes, the most important investigations are the ones protect not just the truth, but the people we love. So, Reddit, after hearing everything, do you think I handled this situation the right way? Was exposing Grace at graduation too harsh, or was it a necessary act to ensure justice and truth prevailed? I'm honestly wrestling with whether I could have handled it differently, even though Emily got her Stanford acceptance back. I'm eager to hear your perspectives and any advice you might have, especially considering the impact on my family and Grace's future.